The mysterious arrival. The night was cold. The sky over the small town of Ashwood was covered with clouds, hiding the moon. Most houses were dark, their lights turned off, the streets silent. It was the kind of night when nothing unusual was supposed to happen. But far above the clouds, something was moving fast. A small, burning shape cut through the sky like a falling star. It was not a star, it was a metal pod, spinning and shaking as it entered the Earth's atmosphere. Inside, a young alien girl clung to her seat, her hands gripping the straps. Her name was Leora. Her silver hair was messy, her eyes wide with fear. The pod rattled as alarms screamed. In a strange language, Leora pressed a button on the side, whispering to herself, "Please, just a little further." The pod tore through the clouds and fell towards the dark forest outside Ashwood. It hit the ground with a loud crash, throwing up dirt and smoke. Birds flew from the trees in panic. For a moment, everything was quiet again. Then the door of the pod hissed open. Leora stepped out, limping slightly. Her clothes were torn. Her face had small cuts in her arms. She carried a strange metal box, no bigger than a loaf of bread. It was covered in symbols that no human had ever seen. She looked around, breathing hard. "This is not home," she whispered, her voice shaking. Leora's ears caught the sound of water nearby. She walked slowly towards a small stream to drink. But before she could kneel, she froze. There were voices in the distance, human voices. She could not understand every word, but she knew people were close. Her first thought was to hide. Back home, humans were just a story told to children, fragile creatures, dangerous in strange ways. She had never seen one with her own eyes, but now she was on their world, alone. She looked at the box in her hands and tightened her grip. She could not let it fall into the wrong hands. Through the trees, she saw a moving light. Someone was walking with a flashlight. Leora stepped back, her heart racing. A figure came into view. A tall man in a dark jacket, his boots crunched on the leaves as he walked closer. He looked human, but different from the stories. His eyes were sharp, scanning the ground like he was searching for something. The man's name was Ethan. He was a local mechanic, returning home after fixing the car in the next town. He had seen a strange streak of light in the sky earlier. Curiosity had made him take the long path through the woods. Now he stood still, staring at the small figure in front of him. At first, he thought it was a lost child in strange clothes. But then she turned, and the light from his flashlight caught her eyes. They glowed faintly, not like a reflection, but from within. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. This was no ordinary girl. Leora stepped back, clutching the box to her chest. She tried to speak, but her English was broken. "Please, no hurt." "Me," she said slowly. Ethan lowered the flashlight a little. "I'm not going to hurt you," he replied, but his mind was racing. Who was she? Where had she come from? Before either of them could speak again, a strange sound echoed through the forest. It was not an animal. It was a clicking mechanical sound, deep and cold. Leora's eyes widened in fear. She turned towards the sound, whispering something in her own language. Then she looked back at Ethan and took a step closer. "They find me," she said, her voice urgent. Ethan frowned. "Who?" Leora only shook her head. "No time, please." "Help." The sound grew louder, closer. Ethan could not see what was coming, but the fear in Leora's eyes told him enough. He reached out his hand. "Come on," he said. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she placed her small, cold hand in his together. They began to move quickly through the trees, away from the sound. The forest seemed darker now. Branches reached out like claws. The ground was uneven. Behind them, the clicking sound was joined by a faint metallic hum. Leora glanced over her shoulder and saw faint red lights moving between the trees. They were hunting her, and now they would see Ethan too, after what felt like minutes of running. They reached the edge of the forest. In the distance, Ethan's small workshop stood, its single light glowing in the night. "We'll be safe there," he said, breathing hard. But Leora knew better. The hunters would not stop, and now She had involved a human, something she was never supposed to do. Still, she followed him, because at this moment, Ethan was the only person she could trust, and somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered that meeting him was no accident. Far behind them, in the shadows of the forest, a tall figure stepped out. Its eyes glowed red, scanning the trail they had left. It tilted its head, made a clicking sound, and began to follow. The hunt had begun. A stranger's help Ethan unlocked. The door to his workshop, the old metal hinges creaked. The smell of oil and metal filled the air. It was warm inside compared to the cold night. Leora stepped in slowly, her eyes moving across the strange human objects. Tools, wires, shelves full of heavy parts. She had never seen so many machines in one place. Ethan shut the door and pulled. The curtains closed. He kept glancing at her, not sure if she was real or if his mind was playing tricks. "Sit," he said softly, pointing to a stool near the workbench. Leora hesitated, then sat, still holding the strange metal box close to her chest. "What's your name?" Ethan asked. She looked at him for a long moment, then said, "Leora." The name felt heavy in the air. Ethan nodded. "I'm Ethan." He waited for her to say more, but she stayed quiet. Her eyes kept drifting to the window, listening for sounds outside. "Where are you from?" He tried again. Leora's fingers tightened around the box. "Far," she said simply. Her English was broken, but her meaning was clear. She didn't want to say more. Ethan leaned on the workbench, studying her face. Her skin had a faint shimmer, like moonlight trapped beneath the surface. Her eyes, they weren't just glowing. They seemed to hold tiny moving lights inside them. It was beautiful and strange. Ethan knew she was not from Earth. Outside, the night was still, too still. Even the crickets had gone quiet. Ethan moved to the back of the workshop and unlocked a small cabinet. He pulled out a first aid kit. "Let me see your leg," he said. She shook her head. "It will heal." He frowned. "Not without help." But before he could argue, she placed her hand over the small cut. A soft light came from her palm. When she moved her hand away, the skin was smooth again. Ethan froze. "Okay. That's new," Leora looked down, almost ashamed. "Ethan," she said quietly, "if they find me, they find Earth." The words made him pause. "Who?" he asked again. She only whispered, "Hunters," as if the word had summoned them. A faint thud echoed from somewhere outside. Then another, closer. Ethan moved to the window, lifting the curtain slightly. "Nothing." He turned back to her. "We need to hide you." She shook her head. "No, I must fix this." She set the metal box on the workbench. It was covered in strange symbols that seemed to shift when you looked at them too long. From a small pouch on her belt, she pulled out a tool that looked half like a needle, half like a crystal. She began to work on the box with fast, practiced hands. Ethan leaned closer. "What is it?" "A key," she said, without looking up. "To what?" he asked. She stopped for just a second, meeting his eyes. "To hope. Or to war." Before Ethan could reply, something tapped against the workshop wall. Not once, but 3 times. Leora froze. Ethan turned off the main light, leaving only the small desk lamp. In the dim light, shadows moved outside the window. Slow, deliberate. Ethan reached for a wrench. It was the only weapon in reach. The tapping came again, this time on the back door. Leora's breathing quickened. She grabbed the box, her fingers shaking now. Ethan whispered, "There's another way out." He led her to a trapdoor behind some shelves. It opened to a narrow passage that led under the building. "This goes to the alley," he said. But before they could climb down, the sound of metal scraping against metal filled the air. The front door lock was turning. Someone, or something, was coming in. Ethan looked at Leora. Her eyes were wide, glowing brighter now. She whispered just one word: "Run." The secret she hides. The alley behind Ethan's workshop was narrow and dark. A cold wind moved through it, carrying the smell of rain and rust. Ethan and Leora slipped out of the trapdoor, careful not to make a sound. The night felt heavier now, as if the air itself knew something dangerous had arrived. Leora clutched the strange box against her chest. She kept glancing over her shoulder. Ethan could see fear in her glowing eyes, but also something else, guilt. He didn't ask questions yet. First, they had to put distance between themselves and the workshop. From inside the building, there was a crash, the sound of metal shelves falling. Ethan didn't need to see to know that whoever was inside was not human. There was a rhythm to the movements, too precise. No shouting, no speaking. Just the sound of something searching. They moved quickly through the back streets of Ashwood. Most houses were dark. Only a few had lights on, somewhere far away. A dog barked, then yelped and went silent. Leora stopped for a second, tilting her head like she was listening to something Ethan couldn't hear. Her face went pale. "They bring hunters," she whispered. Ethan frowned. "Hunters? Like people?" Leora shook her head. "Not people. Machines with blood." Ethan didn't know what that meant, but he didn't like the sound of it. They ducked into an old storage yard filled with broken cars. It was a maze of twisted metal and shadows. Ethan had hidden here once as a kid playing hide and seek. Now it didn't feel like a game. They crouched behind an old van. Leora set the box down and pulled a small device from her belt. It looked like a flat stone with a glowing line across the middle. She pressed her palm to it, and the line pulsed brighter. Ethan leaned closer. "What is that?" "A shield," she said. "It hides my signal." For a while, Ethan pointed at the metal box. "And that?" Leora hesitated, her lips tightening. "If they get it, they find every safe place left," she said. "That's why they want you," Ethan said. She shook her head slowly. "No. They want what is inside." Her voice dropped. "Inside is not a thing. It's a being." Ethan stared at her. "A living thing?" "Yes," she said softly. "Sleeping. Waiting. But if it wakes in wrong hands, war will burn many worlds." Ethan didn't know what to say. It was too much. But the fear in her voice was real. Before he could speak, a low humming began to fill the air. It wasn't the hum of a car or a plane. It was deeper, a vibration that you could feel in your bones. Ethan peeked around the van. At the far end of the yard, 3 tall shapes stood between the broken cars. They moved in perfect unison. Each step made a faint clicking sound. The glow from their eyes was red, but not like light, more like heat burning through glass. One of them turned its head sharply. The movement was too fast, too clean. It scanned the yard, and for a moment, Ethan felt like it was looking directly through the metal van. Leora touched his arm and whispered, "Do not breathe loud." The shapes began to spread out, moving through the yard. Every now and then, one would stop and kneel, placing its hand on the ground like it was feeling vibrations. Ethan's grip tightened on the wrench in his pocket. He knew it was useless, but holding it made him feel less helpless. Then, a sound broke the silence. A piece of loose metal slid off a stack of junk and hit the ground. One of the hunters' heads snapped toward the sound. It moved with terrifying speed, pushing aside an entire car shell like it weighed nothing. The other 2 turned toward the noise as well. Their clicks grew faster, sharper. They had found a trail. Leora's device flickered. Her eyes went wide. "Shield is breaking," she whispered. Ethan looked at the box, then at her. "What happens if they catch us?" he asked. Leora's voice was quiet but certain. "Then Earth will not be the same again." Hunters from the stars. The first drops of rain began to fall. They landed on the metal shells of the broken cars with soft hollow taps. Ethan and Leora stayed low, moving between shadows. But the hunters were closing in. Their steps were slow, but each one sounded certain, like they already knew where their prey was. One of the hunters stopped in front of an old bus. Its tall body was wrapped in dark armor, smooth like glass but marked with thin glowing lines. The rain slid off it without a trace. Its head was narrow, its face hidden behind a mask of black metal. Where a mouth should be, there was only a faint hiss. Its red eyes scanned the area. Not with a beam, but with a pulse. A ripple of invisible energy that made the air feel heavier. Ethan and Leora froze behind a rusted van. She leaned close to his ear and whispered, "Do not look in their eyes." "Why?" He whispered back. "They will see your memories," she said. A sudden metallic voice cut through the rain, not loud but sharp. It was speaking in a language Ethan had never heard. The sound was like shards of glass sliding against each other. Leora tensed. "They speak to the ship," she said. Ethan's stomach dropped. If there was a ship, it meant more could be coming. Another hunter appeared at the far end of the yard, carrying something. It was Ethan's workshop door. The entire door, torn off its hinges. It threw the door aside like scrap, then pointed toward the yard. The first hunter's clicks grew faster. They were now moving straight toward Ethan and Leora. The two of them crawled between the van and a pile of tires. Ethan's boots splashed in a shallow puddle. The sound was small, but the nearest hunter's head snapped in their direction. It turned its entire body without moving its legs, like it was made of a single piece of metal. Then, with a burst of speed, it began to close the distance. "Run," Leora whispered. They dashed toward the far fence. Rain slapped their faces, their breaths loud in the night. Ethan grabbed the chain link and began to climb. Leora threw the box over to the other side before following him. The sound of heavy steps grew louder behind them. As Ethan jumped down, a sharp metallic whip lashed out. It wrapped around his ankle and pulled him back toward the fence. Ethan hit the ground hard. Through the rain, he saw the hunter standing just beyond the fence, its hand holding the glowing whip. Its red eyes locked on him, and for a moment, Ethan felt something strange, like a cold wind inside his mind, flipping through his thoughts as if they were pages in a book. Then Leora's voice cut through. "Let him go." She was holding her small device, the shield stone, now glowing at its brightest. The light hit the hunter's armor, making the glowing lines across its body pulse violently. It hissed and released Ethan, taking 2 steps back, the other. Hunters stopped moving for a moment, as if waiting for a signal. Leora ran to Ethan, pulling him up. "We must go to the edge of the town," she said. "Why there?" he asked, still breathless. She looked toward the dark horizon. "Because that is where I left the path." Ethan didn't understand, but when he glanced back, the hunters were no longer following at full speed. Instead, they moved in slow, deliberate steps, like predators herding their prey toward something. And somewhere above the clouds, a faint, low hum began again. It was deeper this time. It was the sound of the ship drawing closer. Running for their lives, the rain fell harder now. It blurred the streetlights, turned the roads into mirrors. Ethan and Leora ran along the cracked sidewalk, their shadows stretched by the yellow lamps. Behind them, the clicking steps of the hunters echoed against the wet pavement. They were not running at full speed, but they didn't have to. They were gaining ground with every step. Leora's breathing was sharp, but she never loosened her grip on the box. Ethan noticed she kept glancing upward between breaths, not at the hunters, but at the clouds. "What are you looking for?" he asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she pointed ahead, left. They cut through a narrow alley between 2 shuttered shops. Trash cans toppled as they passed. The alley ended at a rusted gate. Ethan climbed first, pulling Leora up after him as they landed on the other side. The sound of metal scraping echoed. The hunters had reached the alley entrance. One of them didn't even climb the gate. It just stepped through it, tearing the metal apart like paper. Ethan's mind raced. Running in a straight line was useless. He grabbed Leora's hand and pulled her toward the old freight yard at the edge of town. It was a maze of train cars and half-collapsed warehouses. If they moved fast, they might be able to lose their pursuers in the dark. Inside the yard, the air smelled of rust and damp wood. Ethan ducked into the shadow of a derailed train. He whispered, "We need to split. I'll distract them." Leora's eyes went wide. "No, they will take your mind. Better mine than yours," Ethan said. But Leora shook her head fiercely. You don't understand. They need you alive. Before Ethan could ask why, the hunters entered the yard. This time they didn't click. They were silent. Their red eyes scanned slowly. One of them knelt and touched the ground, tracing a wet footprint. Ethan's chest tightened. They were too good at tracking. Leora crouched and set the box on the ground. Her hands moved quickly over the strange shifting symbols. One symbol glowed brighter than the rest. With a soft hiss, a small section of the box slid open, revealing something inside. A sphere the size of a marble, glowing faint blue. It pulsed like a heartbeat. What is that? Ethan whispered. Leora's voice was low. A seed. A seed of what? She hesitated, then said, a world. In waiting. Ethan blinked. You mean life? She nodded. Life that can grow anywhere, even on dead worlds. Even here. Ethan stared at her. If that was true, this wasn't just about war. It was about control over creation itself. A sudden metallic screech cut their whispers short. One of the hunters had spotted the faint glow from the box. It let out a sound like breaking steel, and all three began to move at once. Fast this time, too fast. Ethan grabbed the box and stuffed it into his jacket. Come on, he shouted. They sprinted between two train cars, water splashing around their feet. A whip cracked behind them, narrowly missing Ethan's shoulder. Another hit the ground in front of them, slicing through the wet concrete like butter. Up ahead, Ethan spotted an open drainage tunnel. It was small, but just wide enough for them to crawl. They dove inside, the cold water rushing around their knees. The hunters reached the tunnel entrance, but didn't follow. Instead, they stopped, their heads tilted, listening to something far away. Leora pressed her hand against the tunnel wall. They call the ship closer, she said. Ethan's stomach sank. If the ship came down here, there would be nowhere left to run. They pushed deeper into the tunnel, the sound of rain and hunters fading behind them, but the air grew colder. From somewhere ahead, a dim white light flickered. Leora froze, her voice barely a whisper. This light is not human. The last stand the drainage tunnel sloped down. The flickering white light ahead grew brighter with every step. Ethan's boots splashed in the cold water, his breath misting in the air. Leora followed close behind, her eyes scanning every shadow. The tunnel walls slowly changed, from rough concrete to smooth metal. Faded symbols, not alien but human, appeared on the panels. Some were words in English, barely readable under layers of rust. U.S. Defense Research, restricted access. They stepped into a wide chamber. Rows of old machines lined the walls, their surfaces covered in dust. A huge emblem of a faded eagle was painted on the far wall. Ethan stared. This is military. Leora tilted her head. Your people built this? Yeah, Ethan said slowly, but it's been shut down for decades. Nobody talks about these places anymore. In the center of the room stood a raised platform with a circular metal console. Old, but not dead. Faint green light still blinked across its surface. Ethan approached and brushed off the dust. This could still work, he murmured. Leora's voice was sharp. Work for what? Ethan smiled faintly. Something you wouldn't expect humans to have. He flipped a switch, and a deep hum rolled through the chamber from the ceiling. Thick metal shutters began to slide into place, sealing the doors. Leora's eyes widened. You have shields? Ethan nodded. Not like yours, but strong enough to buy us time. Before they could speak again, the sound of clicking footsteps echoed through the tunnel behind them. The hunters had found the way in. Their silhouettes appeared in the entrance, glowing eyes cutting through the dark. They didn't hesitate. They stepped inside. The first one raised its whip, sparks crackling along the glowing cord. Ethan dashed to a side wall, yanking open an old storage locker. Inside was a stack of odd-looking rifles, coated in dust and cobwebs. He tossed one to Leora. She looked at it like she wasn't sure if it was a weapon or a tool. Ethan loaded his and grinned. These are electromagnetic pulse launchers. Your friends are going to hate them." The first hunter lashed forward with its whip. Ethan fired, and a burst of blue-white energy slammed into the hunter's chest. Its glowing lines flickered wildly, and it staggered back, movements jerky. But the others didn't stop. They split apart, moving along the sides of the chamber to flank. Leora dropped to one knee and aimed carefully. When her shot hit, the second hunter froze in place, red eyes dimming for just a second. But it recovered faster than Ethan expected. "They adapt," she said quickly. "Then we just have to hit harder," Ethan replied. The chamber shook, a low rumble from above. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Leora looked up, her voice tight. "The ship is almost here." Ethan's eyes darted to the central console. If they could power up more of the old systems, maybe they could. Turn the whole facility into a trap. Keep them busy, he shouted. He ran to the console, typing commands into the ancient keyboard. Most of the keys stuck, but the old machine still responded. Screens lit up with schematics of the base. One diagram showed something deep underground, a massive coil surrounded by warning signs. Magnetic containment, high output. Ethan grinned. If he could overload it. The pulse might fry every piece of alien tech in the room, maybe even the ship above. The hunters closed in, moving faster now. Leora fired again, but one whip wrapped around her weapon. Yanking it from her hands, she fell back, the box sliding. Across the floor, the lead hunter turned toward it, reaching down, and Ethan hit the final key. A siren blared. The floor shook harder. The air filled with a deep, rising hum that rattled their bones. Leora's eyes locked on Ethan. "What are you doing?" He looked back at her, leveling the field. "What changes everything?" The hum in the walls grew so loud it felt like the air was shaking. The green lights on the console turned red, one by one. Ethan's finger hovered over the final switch. The hunters stepped closer, their glowing lines flickering as if they already sensed the danger. "Now!" Leora shouted. Ethan slammed the switch down. A blinding wave of blue-white energy burst from the floor. It hit the hunters like a silent explosion. Their bodies jerked violently, the glowing lines on their armor snapping like broken wires. One dropped to its knees, the red light in its eyes fading. Another collapsed completely, smoke rising from the cracks in its armor. The last one staggered, took 2 steps toward Leora, and then froze mid-motion. The room was silent, except for the soft hiss of cooling metal. But something else had changed. The box on the floor was glowing, not faintly, but with the same pulse as the energy coil. The strange shifting symbols on its surface locked into place, forming a single clear shape, a handprint. Leora's eyes widened. "This was never supposed to open here," she whispered. Ethan walked over, and without thinking, pressed his hand into the mark. The box hissed and split open like petals unfolding. Inside was the glowing sphere he had seen before, but now it was larger. Floating above it was a tiny image made of light. Not a person, not an alien, but a map of stars. One of them pulsed brighter than the rest. "It was Earth." Leora's voice trembled. "It was you. All along." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" She turned to him slowly. "My people told stories about the first builders, the ones who shaped life across worlds, then vanished. We thought they were myths." She pointed to the map. "They were human." Ethan stared at the glowing sphere. The thought felt too big, too impossible. "You're saying Earth made you?" "Not me," Leora said, "but my kind. And many others." She took a step back, her voice low. "That's why they came here. Not just for the seed, but for you." Above them, the rumble of the alien ship shook the walls again, but now another sound joined it, deep, rhythmic thuds. Leora looked up sharply. "That is not their ship," she said. Ethan's stomach tightened. "Then whose is it?" The answer came in a beam of white light that broke through the roof. It wasn't cold like the hunters. It was warm, almost like sunlight. In the glow, A voice spoke not in English, not in Leora's language, but in something older. Yet somehow, Ethan understood it. Earth, your watch has ended. Your war begins. The light expanded, swallowing the room, and in that moment, Ethan knew he wasn't just protecting Leora anymore. He was standing at the center of a fight. For every world humans had ever touched, and the hunters had only been the first wave.